टाटा। Just cancel one person. Let it be. What is his name? Okay, we'll do it. from here only, it's not getting connected there. So just like please select another video camera. So select another video camera in the settings. See, start video. The world is experiencing multiple transitions. The old world order is vanishing, but the counters of a new world order are uncertain. A very good afternoon to one and all present here, and sincere apologies for a delay of 5 to 10 minutes. St.Anne's Degree College for Women was established in the year 2005 and administered by Society of Sisters of St.Anne's Madras with a vision to provide humanizing and liberalizing education so as to form responsible citizens who in solidarity with others create just a society. The foundress, servant of God, Mother Thatipatri Gyanamma is a visionary and missionary who dedicated her life to enlighten and educate poor young girls in 1863 by starting an educational institutions exclusively for girls. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's two-day international interdisciplinary webinar organized by Department of Psychology and Department of Business Administration on Psychology of Crisis and Resilience to Change. With the blessings of our foundress, servant of God, Mother Thatipatri Gyanamma, with the consent of respected Reverend Mother Margaret Julie, the Education Coordinator of St. Anne's Educational Society, the Secretary and Administrator of St. Anne's Degree College for Women, with the support and advice of our beloved Principal, Professor Nisha Joseph, St. Anne's Degree College for Women. It's a matter of great honor for us to welcome you all and express our deepest gratitude for inaugurating this international webinar. God is our refuge in strength and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear though the earth give way and mountains fall into the heart of the sea. Psalm 46. Now I request Assistant Professor Rajeshwari to grace this occasion with the prayer song. Over to you, ma'am.
ಬಿಳಿಯ ಕುಸುಮಗಳ ಮಾಲೆ ಕೊರಳಲಿರಿ ಬೆಳ್ಳಿ ವೀಣೆಯನ್ನು ನುಡಿಸಿ ನಿನ್ನ ಕಂಗಳ ಬೆಳಕನು ನನ್ನ ಕಂಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬಿದೆ ನಿನ್ನ ಕಂಗಳ ಬೆಳಕನು ನನ್ನ ಕಂಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ತುಂಬಿದೆ ಏಳು ಮಗುವೇಳೇಳು ಎಂದು ಹೊಸ ಬಾಳ ತಂದೆಯಮ್ಮ ಏಳು ಮಗುವೇಳೇಳು ಎಂದು ಹೊಸ ಬಾಳ ತಂದೆಯಮ್ಮ ಶಾರದೆ ದಯೆ ತೋರಿದೆ ಶಾರದೆ ದಯೆ ತೋರಿದೆ ನಿನ್ನ ಭಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಂದು ಬಳಲುತ್ತಿರೆ ಬಂದು ಕೈಯ ಹಿಡಿದೆ ಕಂದಯೇ ಕಳುವಿ ಮುಂದೆಂದು ಮಾಡಿದ ಪೂಜೆಯೋ ಇಂದು ನಿನ್ನ ಕೃಪೆಯಿಂದ ನಾನು ಆನಂದ ಕಂಡೆನಮ್ಮ. ಇಂದು ನಿನ್ನ ಕೃಪೆಯಿಂದ ನಾನು ಆನಂದ ಕಂಡೆನಮ್ಮ. ಶಾರದೆ ದಯೆ ತೋರಿದೆ ಶಾರದೆ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.
Thank you, Ms. Rajeshwari. Before we go further, I want to review the functionality of GoToWebinar. Few instructions to be followed. Your active participation is important throughout the session. Right now, I have everyone on mute to avoid background noises that may distract you from listening to the webinar sessions. Throughout the presentation, someone on staff will be managing the chat functionality. You can enter your questions and comments in the question box, which is on the right-hand side of your desktop within the gallery view. So you can type your questions, and at the end of every session, one of our faculty members will put forward your questions. We will also be streaming live on YouTube. I will now request our principal to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, Nisha ma'am.
Good afternoon to all the participants, secretary and organizers of this international interdisciplinary webinar on psychology of crisis and resilience to change. I take this opportunity to congratulate the Department of Psychology and Department of Business Administration for jointly taking initiative to organize this live webinar on a very relevant topic where the contemporary global order is rapidly adjusting to this new normal and new equations are forming with a speed that a few months back would be unthinkable. I extend a warm welcome to the participants from all over the world for this overwhelming response for the two-day international webinar. Our institution, under the guidance of our Secretary, Reverend Sister Margaret Julie, has been in the forefront of making education more meaningful and imparting education for life. A note of greeting and appreciation to Dr. Ashok H.S., our eminent keynote speaker, retired professor of psychology, who will be acquainting us on the nuances of crisis and resilience, a holistic approach. Wishing all the participants the very best for a fruitful and insightful webinar section. Thank you.
It got ended. 1 second. No, mother, this is first time we will get 3 full hours. Yes, mother, 1 second. Yes, Samantha, we'll have to rejoin once again on the password. I'll just bring the password because this is Rajeshwari. Rajeshwari. Give the password. Slowly. Don't touch you. No, we are not able to. One second. One second, sister. I will check that, sister. Starting a small introduction about our college. St. Anne's Degree College for Women was established in the year 2005 and administered by Society of Sisters of St. Anne Madras with a vision to provide humanizing and liberalizing education so as to form responsible citizens who, in solidarity with others, create a just society. The foundress servant of Godmother Thatipatri Gyanama is a visionary and missionary who dedicated her life to enlighten and educate poor young girls in 1863 by starting an educational institution exclusively for girls. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's two-day international interdisciplinary webinar organized by Department of Psychology and Department of Business Administration on Psychology of Crisis and Resilience to Change. With the blessing of our foundress, servant of God, Mother Thatipatri Gyanama, with the consent of respected Reverend Mother Margaret Julie, the Education Coordinator of St. Anne's Educational Society, the Secretary and Administrator of St. Anne's Degree College for Women, with the support and advice of our beloved Principal, Professor Nisha Joseph, St. Anne's Degree College for Women. It is a matter of great honor for me to welcome you all and express our deepest gratitude for inaugurating this international webinar. God is our refuge and strength, and ever-present help. Rajeshwari, welcome, please. We will start with the first keynote address. The presenter for today, the first presenter for the afternoon is Dr. Ashok H.S., retired Professor of Psychology, Bangalore University, Bengaluru. Sir will be speaking on Crisis and Resilience, a Holistic Approach. Dr. Ashok H.S. was a professor of psychology at the Bangalore University and had served the university for 35 years. After attaining superannuation faculty during the course of his tenure at Bangalore University, has guided scholars for their PhDs and currently research interests are in the field of education, internet and gaming addiction. With this, I request Dr. Ashok to please take over for the keynote address. Sir, you can start.
So let me congratulate.
I will share the PPT for you, sir.
First, congratulate the St.Anne's College for organizing such a interesting and educative seminar. Crisis itself, they may be factor, and we are all of us are some sort of the other crisis. So let us, in a very brief, I think I will discuss about what is psychological crisis and resilience and what is change and communities have to develop this sort of a resilience and then probably what the goal is to resilience. So when we say crisis, people or the state of crisis when they face an obstacle to important life goals, an obstacle that can
YouTube long showing this is why.
surmountable by means of customary means of problem solving. So there is
Continue.
already if a particular is viable, it's not considered as a crisis at all. We know what it is. Or, in other words, crisis can be it is an upset in the failure of one's critical problem solving approach, which results in disorientation, restlessness, sadness, confusion, and
Zoom
experience
in.
of probably some of the symptoms are repeated experience across the globe because of the COVID can be an example for this particular
Clear is
definition.
clear.
It explains
Depends on the phone
definition.
and network.
In another definition for psychological crisis, the crisis is a perception or experience of an event or situation
On Zoom,
or
Zoom,
event
Zoom
or
is the
that exceeds the person's current resources and coping mechanisms. So, as in the earlier definition it simply said, if we know how to cope up, it may not be a crisis at all. So, when we feel that the coping mechanism is a failure or the resources are not facilitating us to deal with this, it becomes a crisis. Then come to change. Now, this is another important component, another interesting component. The only way that we can live is if we grow. The only way that we can grow is if we change. And the only way that we can change is if we learn. And the only way we can learn is if we are exposed. And the only way that we can become exposed is if we throw ourselves out into the open. Do it through it yourself. This is what the resilience component comes in. So, development and growth depends upon this particular change. And when we talk in terms of this particular change, another interesting component of change is also, say, for example, whenever there is a change, when we least expect it, life sets us a change to test our courage and willingness to change. At such a moment, there is no point in pretending that nothing has happened or in saying that we are not ready. That challenge will not pay, and life doesn't look back. And a week is more than enough time for us to decide whether or not to accept our destiny. Look at that again. I try to think in the concept of the current scenario of COVID and at the international global level. So how we never expected this will happen, and we don't know how to deal with this particular aspect. Now, when we talk in terms of the relationship between change and crisis or the crisis and the change, change is a natural process. Whether you like it or not, things will change. You yourself change, others will change, as a result of it, you are also going to change. So change is a natural process. And change is desirable. So when change is desirable, now look at the component. So look at the dichotomy that is involved here. At one point of time, we feel bored that nothing has changed. And when there is a change, there is a resistance. So people resist the change. So if you say, feel safety, wear masks, gloves, etc., why will not come to me at all? So there should be a resistance of all sorts of things. And resistance is the primary cause for the perception of crisis. So when you say resistance, this particular why should I change is a factor. And when you say why should I change, that resistance will be the primary cause for the crisis. Now, when you look at the crisis or the psychological aspect of crisis, there are three developmental types of crisis we can see. One is the developmental crisis, another will be situational crisis, and the third one will be existential crisis. Now, developmental crisis as the individual grow across the several stages of development, certain crises probably all of us are familiar with identity crisis that is typically experienced by adolescents, etc. And we also find the crisis at the various stages of life. So, developmental crisis refers to the crisis that a human being can experience at the various stages of development: childhood, adolescence, adulthood, elderly. So, this is one type of crisis that human beings experience. The second would be situational crisis. So probably right now, what we are experiencing is a situational crisis. So there is a war, there is a pandemic, there is a drought, or there is a. These are all and these situational crises we talk about is a change and adopting to that particular change. Situational crisis is another factor that we can look into. So that situation results in crisis, and until and unless or till we develop certain appropriate mechanism, the effect of crisis is. The third one would be the existential crisis. Now, this is more of a purely a psychological factor that we find the questioning of existence itself. Probably nowadays, especially, we find more in the recent, we find the incidence of suicide is being more now life and death. The individual knows deathbed. The individual wants to live. Whereas embedded into the idea of committing suicide are committing suicide. So the primary reason for suicide is all these aspects. When you are lost, you have to stay inside the house, and you find, is this what the life is? Why should I exist? Because of this. Now, existential crisis is another thing that we can find where the individual has to develop certain, let us say, the traits that becomes essential to deal with this sort of existential crisis is concerned. Now, when you talk in terms of let us say actual conflict that can be seen at different walks of life based on the different types of roles that the individual may play. As a child, at a personal level, child, adolescent, adult, elderly, that point we have already discussed about. Occupational factor. Now, suppose, for example, now we find post-COVID, what is likely to happen? Whether I would, whether my job environment changes that is taking place. So these are some of the factors that can result in one of those types of let's say crisis. It can be existential, it can be situational, or it can be personal. How the individual perceives it is a factor that need to be understood before offering a solution, before offering a help to that particular individual. The third aspect that we need to look into when we talk in terms of crisis and change is that interpersonal factor. So, family, peer group, society, and community. Now, on all these three aspects, change is seen. So, the earlier system of family as a single unit, as a joint family, you know, in the change, you talk in terms of extended family, you talk in terms of a nuclear family, you talk in terms of living together, and these sort of a component changing the social institution like family, marriage itself is undergoing a change, which can lead to whether I can cope up with that particular change, whether I adopt to that particular change, can result in the crisis. The interpersonal relationship is another major factor that we can find. So we find, on the one hand, we find that social media is becoming more popular. The real relationship, okay, virtual relationship and real relationship is a major factor that we need to take into consideration. And that's where the peer relationship is playing an important role. That the way in which you relate to others, the way in which you depend on others. Now, when we talk in terms of interpersonal relationship is concerned, how far the dynamics of interpersonal relationship has an effect on you can result in the experience of stress is changing. Probably uh, students of sociology know how, especially when we talk in terms of change process is concerned. So you talk in terms of, let us say, sanitization, westernization, etc. So people across the different strata try to copy, try to adopt individuals belonging to the higher strata, and that is where the confusion or the resulting in the crisis is concerned. So change in the different walks of life, the roles that they play, and these roles while playing and adopting the change can be able to particular family. So the signs of crisis. So what do you mean by crisis? How do you know that you are experiencing the let's say crisis? So some of the let's say signs of crisis are dramatic shifts in sleep habits. So the hours of sleep and the satisfaction that you have slept undergoes a change. Though you would be spending time on bed. So spending time on bed doesn't mean that you are satisfied. Okay. So dramatic shifts in the sleep habits, sudden changes in the mood swings are common. Withdrawal from normal activities, probably that is one of the factors that is happening. You are used to 10 to 5 job or 9 to 3 job or whatever that be, that is not there. So withdrawal from the normal activity, decreased performance at school or work. So whatever productive work which you are involving in would be, let us say, decrease in the performance, and neglect of personal hygiene. So when you know that all this, nobody is watching me, nobody is there to, so this neglect of personal hygiene comes in, especially when you say that you are not with your family, okay, when you are outside for a job or whatever that means. So when you are not with the family, you are alone in a PG or in a hostel or etc. So this can come in. Neglect of personal hygiene could be a particular factor, and changes in the weight. So the type of food that is available to you, intake of food is another factor that can show the signs of crisis. Okay. Uh, Now, when you experience in the, let's say the crisis, you don't keep quiet. You have to adopt, you have to develop your own methods of, let's say, coping with that particular, let's say, crisis is concerned. One of the important components that is required is the tendency to develop resilience or bouncing back. So, resilience is, in a very simple term, is a capacity to recover from difficult life events. Life event has come in now, especially when we talk in terms of situational crisis. So we are in a situational crisis, and the situation is not a permanent one. So it is a temporary phenomenon, and how do we, let us say, overcome them? So tendency to recover from difficult life situations or life events, or it is your ability to and diversity and bounce back and that's where right nowadays there is another interesting concept that is being coined up. I think you are familiar with the intelligent quotient, you are familiar with the emotional quotient, you are familiar with spiritual or the social quotient. Now yourself adversity can come in. So that's a factor that we need to consider. That's another factor that we could look into. So how you keep it would be possible for you to let us say develop this particular resilience. So the steps for developing resilience, there are 7 C's that we can look into. So the 7 C's are competence, develop the competence how to deal with this situation. Confidence, develop the self confidence, see that you are capable, you have the strength to overcome this particular let's say situation is concerned. So that's one factor. Connectivity. So find the relationship, establish relationship, connect with it, even though, say, for example, you are in terms of social distance. Social distance only in terms of physical proximity, but social distance doesn't prevent you from contacting or taking help or contacting people with whom you, let us say, can speak and share your, let us say, ideas or feelings, etc. So that's a factor that you need, you can develop. So develop a sense of connection, character. So develop your character. Okay? So personality component is an important factor. Contribution is a factor. So whatever that you have, if you contribute, that develops. That somebody is there to help of let us say a contribution is a factor. Whatever the difficulty you may be experiencing, it's only a temporary phenomenon. There are people who are experiencing much more. Let us say the diversity, and comparing to them, can you help them to come up, or can you help them to cope up with this situation? Is a factor that you can look into. Coping, develop a coping strategy. Probably when we talk in terms of coping, there are two types, emotional and problem centered. Emotional is always dangerous because temporarily it can help you. So feeling sad, feeling depressed, or crying, etc. Temporarily it will help you, but how long you can go on crying? So develop a problem centered to have control. So if you can develop these seven C's in you, probably resilience would be a factor that you can look at. Now, when we talk in terms of change, crisis, and how to deal with this change and crisis, there is a need for a holistic approach. So, again, when we say when you have to clap, one with a single hand you can clap. So there are at least two hands are required to clap. So that is where when you talk about dealing with a crisis can be due to several factors. Though on the one hand you say it is perceived, the perception can be attributed to, can be linked to the changes that are taking place outside the self also. So that is the reason why there is a need for a holistic approach to deal with let us say, the crisis component is concerned. So the measures that individuals have to take, or the measures that would be useful for a holistic approach would be: what does an individual can do to deal with change and to deal with the crisis at a personal level? Can he be a person to cause change, or can he be a person to adopt to that particular change? So this is one particular factor. Measures to be taken by the family. How, when I was talking about some adversity quotient, how can the family, in their, parenting, can develop or can use this particular style of making the children or helping the children to experience adversity, so that how to teach them how to deal with that particular adverse situations also. That is where the family becomes an essential factor. Measures to be taken by a society is concerned. So now we are coming to the macro level. So what, again, whenever there is a change that is so suppose, for example, we are talking in terms of the educational sector. So how to deal with this particular sector? Now, when you say, for example, online teaching, this is where the society has to take, so when we say, for example, society has to take in, can the online be made for LKG students or the children of very young age? Now, this is where the society has to take care of. Can it be linked to, can it be limited, or how it can be adopted, etc. So this is where the society will also play a significant role. And lastly, I think the change, or it also has to be at a global level. So how changes that are taking place across the globe. Now, when we talk in terms of crisis here, no matter whether it's a developing country, developed country, or a developing country, underdeveloped country, how change in one can affect the change in the other. So probably we talk in terms of SARC and G7, all other let's say international bodies are there. But for the point of, or from the point of view of psychological health, or from the point of view of dealing with the crisis, also, can we think in terms of say develop? Can you hear now? No?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah, you're audible? I'm audible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. The last point I was talking about is how, at a global level, the measures have to be taken. When we talk in terms of, let us say, the economies, so whatever the changes, whatever the crisis that is taking place, how psychologically, or from a point of view of behavioral component is concerned, a body can be formed, so that, irrespective of the status of economy, whether it is developed or developing or an undeveloped economy, how those society or a nation can develop the mechanisms of helping the people to adapt to that particular change and to deal with the crisis. I think this is in a nutshell. I wanted to share my cycle crisis, how crisis, what are the different types of crises that can crop up in an individual's life, and the dichotomy or
Sir,
an
can you
irony
hear me,
where
sir?
change is concerned. Though change is inevitable, desirable, change is also resistant, and this resistance itself can lead to the crisis is concerned, and that's where there is a
Sir,
need
can you
for us
hear
to
me,
deal
sir?
with a change, and the resistance have to be, let us say, adopted. Resistance have to be successfully, worked out, and that is where resilience becomes essential. We have to develop a resilience so that with the 7 C's that I have, let us say, mentioned, probably with that it will be possible for us to deal with this situation is concerned. So thank you very much, and thank the authorities and the audiences listening to my talk. Thank you very much.
No, it's okay. Don't you? Share. Some settings he came. Want me to watch this call, please. Nothing minus.
सर थोड़ा हेलो Hello, ma'am, hearing?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you can start the slides.
Yes, sir. So can you see the screen, sir?
Yes.
Yes, sir. You can start, sir.
I think the slides are not on, no?
Sir, slides are on, sir.
I think we are not able to, I'm not able to see.
It's okay. Sir, can you?
I'm able to see the files. I'm able to see the screen. I'm able to see the files where my slides are also there. But did you open it? Open the files already?
Yes, sir. Just 1 minute, sir.
Yeah.
After 2 minutes, it will take. Sir, is it visible now, sir?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you can directly go to the first slide. We can start, and I will let you know when to change the
Yes.
slides.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So, thank you for inviting me for this talk. And I thank the previous speaker for giving very interesting overview about the situation right now. I thank Professor Ashok for setting the right tone for this presentation, for this conference. So we all know that this particular situation is kind of a difficult situation for all of us. Uncertainty outside, unpredictability outside. And we all know that we are not equipped to handle this kind of things at point because we were never trained for handling these kind of issues. So, in the academic setting, we all know that the educational organizations are closed. There are no clarity about the examinations for most of the universities. So, we know that there is lack of clarity in almost all domains of the academic scene right now, including the results, the graduations, and some of our students already got placement in some of the organizations, and they don't know when the lockdown is over, when they come back, the organization will be there or not. People might have got admissions abroad. They've already made the booking. They already made the accommodation. They already made the tuition fees, but uh, academic organizations, academic setting, academic institutions are delaying the process of intake, primarily because there is lack of clarity. So this lack of clarity is everywhere. And in Bangalore, you know that almost 3 to 4 lakhs of individuals are laid off by the organizations because they're not able to sustain the business. Can you go to the next slide? Fine, fine, no problem. So it's okay. So the issue right now, most of the people are worried about things which they don't have any control. Say, for example, lockdown. We talk about the rate in which the infection is getting into the next level of Indian context. So we don't know how these things are going to get into the next level. So instead of worrying about that right now, we can always worry about things outside. But the only thing which can be done at this point is to look inside, shift our focus from things we don't have any control to things we have control. So this self-talk inside primarily a negative in nature. So what happens is negative self-talk is coming up repeatedly in the context of getting into a negative self-hypnosis. So it's impacting us emotionally, it's impacting us feeling, it's impacting us physiologically, and we know that it's impacting us in our behavioral space also. So people, that could be the reason why there are a lot of cases about suicide. There are a lot of cases about emotional outbursts. People getting committed violent outbreaks. It's about wasting a lot of energy talking about things which we don't have any control. So we need to have a paradigm shift in our processing information. So what is the paradigm shift here? From the outside to the focus inside. We need to understand that it's not about the situation, it's about reinitiating the cognitive thinking process. That we need to understand that it's not about the situations which are responsible for our issues right now. It's about the way we interpret the perspective, the paradigm of that. So we need to keep a different perspective right now. So that's the reason why we discussed about shifting from outside to shifting inside. So it's about perspective, it's about changing the paradigm, it's about the way you look at things and to modify the way we look at things, which will help us in terms of changing the way we feel about things around. Next slide. Yes. So this is we are spending a lot of time and energy in terms of handling things outside, and we know that we are not able to handle that. because things are beyond our control. Say, for example, suppose you're stuck in traffic. You have an option of abusing the system, you have an option of abusing the government, the road traffic system, and everything. But the reality is that you're stuck in traffic. You cannot lift your car and run away. So, what we need to do here, we need to try to understand getting from a problem to a problem solving situation. So the emotional issues which we have right now, these are all normal responses, because the research say that we are going through a grieving process. There is a loss here, loss of finances, loss of freedom, loss of social interaction, loss of reinforcements. So what happens, instead of getting into the denial, it's time for us to get into the acceptance mode, the same process which Elizabeth Kubler-Ross very clearly explained. And the problem right now, the frustration tolerance, the how much frustration we can take at this point in time, primarily because of our surrounding, primarily because of our personality, primarily because of our upbringing. Most of the generation which we have right now, they're not able to take the frustration to beyond a certain level. That could be the reason why there is an increase in the suicides, there is increase in emotional issues, there is increase in breakdown in our system right now. So we might need to get into a very different mode of functioning by enhancing the coping styles and coping strategies and coping skills based on the process. Can we have the next slide? So the which we get right now, the primary issue which we get right now is people are not motivated. People are not, people are not motivated. People are not interested in sustaining in their day-to-day routine, primarily because there's no motivation end of the day. So how can we have a self-sustained motivational enhanced process on a regular day? That's primarily to have a proper routine on a regular basis. To have a proper routine on a regular basis, so you need to make a list at the beginning of the day and review it in a specific way. And end of the day, when you look back, you know that you have done these things perfectly fine. That itself is a motivator for you to sustain in this system. And while preparing a schedule, make sure that you are kind of specific, and also include things which give rise to some kind of relief for you, some kind of recreational activities, some kind of pleasurable activities which you used to like doing before. That is very important for you to sustain your sanity at this point in time. And make sure that you don't need to be that, even though you need to be specific, but you don't need to be strict and rigid when it comes to modify, when it comes to having this structure. Next slide. So, what are the things which you can plan right now? We all know that you had a lot of interest in generating hobbies and other activities, but you never got a chance to do this because of lack of time. You can give multiple reasons for that. You can always say that it's lack of time or whatever it is. But right now, uh, it's time for you to explore those hobbies and interests. Say, for example, I live in Bangalore, where before I used to spend around 2 hours on a regular day for reaching my office because of heavy traffic. But right now, since I'm working from home, I don't need to spend these 2 hours. This 2 hours is a bonus for me. So what do I do with these 2 hours on a regular day? So that's the reason why I mentioned about recreating or reinitiating, reinstalling your old hobbies and interests. There are a lot of do-it-yourself kits available. So one of my clients recently told me that he bought a guitar almost 10, 15 years ago, but never got a chance to explore it. But right now, he has started to learn the guitar because he got an online tutor. So this way, you can initiate that. Most of the universities in the West, including Harvard and Stanford, started online courses. So you can think of exploring that. A lot of organizations, a lot of colleges. Say, for example, right now we are conversing, or we are interacting in an online platform. So these are all things which you can think of. So now it's time for us to set our goals a little more consciously. Always remember, after 5 years, when you interact with somebody, they might always ask you, "What did you do differently in this 3 months or 4 months of lockdown?" So it's time for you to revisit this. It's time for you to uh, recreate your goals once again, and make sure that it goes in line with the agenda. It's internship. So I always say the students, right time for them to understand or work on, explore on different modalities right now. So internships abroad. So previously we had a lot of difficulties in terms of looking for internships outside because of the travel, the stay, and things like that. Now they're all open for free. So think in that direction. A lot of discussion forums online available right now. Say, for example, Bangalore, we have around 10 to 15 reading clubs. These are the things which you can think of exploring right now, so that when you look back after the lockdown, you know that you have done justice to the free time. You have done justice to the time you have spent at home. Next slide. These are all academic forums where anybody can think of joining. So, how can we make use of this online platform in a judicious way? One most important thing, most of the students, most of the people, not only students, and adults also, because it's a new structure, new schedule, new rhythm, where most of us are never exposed to. So we start our day without any proper agenda. So that needs to be broken first. We need to have a proper agenda. What exactly you are going to look into today? If you are a student, if you are an adult, if you are an employee, make sure that you have a very clear set of goals before you start your day, so that end of the day when you look back, you have a lot of tick marks. Make sure that all of us are working from home, so there is shortage of space. Even then, make sure that you have a dedicated space, whether for work or for study. And so far, the only problem with this online mode is the only one person who is active is a teacher, or is a presenter, or the facilitator. Not like the class. The classroom, you have a lot of people involved, engaged. So you know that kids are uh, working on a specific program, but that luxury is not there in online models. So I would say that better to have an active oriented program, join the discussion. And one important thing which we need to do here is take one thing at a time. So I've seen people joining, most of the online courses are free nowadays, so people join multiple platforms at the same time, but it's not going to help you in the long run. So we need to have focused exploration of our academic activities, and always make sure that you need to have controlled processes for your engagement. Give adequate rest for your brain instead of looking at 24 bar 7 onto the platform. Make sure that you have proper time for each and everything on a regular day. So rest your brain also. Next slide. Yeah. So we have already mentioned in the previous slides that how do we find motivation? By primarily engaging ourselves in different exploratory activities, like in the creative mode if you're interested, or if you are more an academic person, then get into informative documentaries and relevant course materials from the net. Netflix recently published a lot of documentaries in psychology and different domains in social sciences. These are all avenues wherein which you never had before, but you can look into exploring these kind of things. Uh, Learning a new language. I've telling one of my friend was telling recently that it's time for you to learn a new language, because most of the European countries they take psychology students and social science students for high studies for free without a much tuition fees. But you can explore that only if you have, if you are comfortable with that particular language. So it's time for you to explore some of these domains going forward, so that it's a good investment. It's not a dead investment. It's going to be a good investment going forward in the long run. Next slide. Yeah. So this is a very important point which I have thought to be discussed in this platform like this. Very interesting statistics from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, which they have very clearly mentioned that an average Indian spends around 4 hours to 6 hours on a regular day on social media networking sites. And we know that that has increased now, primarily because most of us are relying on our gadgets for spending time, whether it's for academic or job related purpose, but we are spending a lot of time and energy in this. So that needs to be modified. Another one about our sleep patterns. Since you don't have any structure on a regular day right now, people are sleeping too much or too less. That needs to be worked on. Primarily because you are, for a healthy interaction going forward, you might need to have a proper sleep. Minimum 6 to 7 hours of sleep is required, because it's important for you to keep your energy in the right direction or during daytime. If you don't have sleep, what happens is that it will create a lot of ruckus in your system. And there are a lot of books, including the Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, very clearly mentions about the importance of sleep. How about your physical activities? That's also very important. Physical activities, if you're able to have 20 to 30 minutes of physical activity on a regular day, that will help you in terms of increasing the neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which are required for you to keep your wellness status going forward. And also eating on time. So now what happens, most of the people report that they're not hungry because they're not physically active, but that's not true, primarily because you need to understand that your blood sugar levels needs to be kept in the optimal level. If you don't take uh, food on time, that can lead to a lot of other issues, like say for example, then you might get into um, you know blood sugar decrease in the uh, system, and it can lead to emotional issues. That's very important. Watching TV shows and movies throughout, that needs to be minimized, reduced, and kept in the optimal level, so that you'll be able to see that the joyful feeling can be converted into a wellness feeling in the long run. Otherwise, these are all very temporary. These are all very short-lived. In the long run, you may not be able to derive happiness in the long run. Can we have the next slide? Yes. So what do we need to do now? We need to have a plan for things that make you happy. So on a regular schedule, along with your academic and job related work, you need to have activities which are pleasurable. That means to say that the which you used to do before, now you might have stopped doing it. That can be incorporated in your regular work. That's a starting point. You can channelize your creativity by getting involved in different online platforms, or you yourself can think of initiating some things by yourself in your circle, academic and your job circle. Also remember one important thing here. You need to have a buddy. You need to have a person who can help you in you need to buddy with somebody who can help you in channelizing the creativity, so that it makes it can ensure that you're on track. You're on track. So this will also help you in terms of generating. This will also help you in terms of uh, keeping your brain alert and vigilant, and this will also help you in keeping your mood on the higher side. Can you go to the next slide, last slide? Oh, yeah. So what happens now when you are on a automatic pilot mode? Most of us are in automatic pilot mode. You're doing the same thing like yesterday. You are doing the same thing like day before yesterday. There is no uh, feeling of present. So what happens when we are anxious, when we are worried? There's a tendency for us to think about things in the future, think about things about things. What mindful exercises, mindful practices will help you in fine tuning yourself to be in the present. And there are a lot of apps available right now. So I strongly recommend you to explore an app called Headspace, if possible, which will help you in terms of being in the present. So there are a lot of exercises as a part of this practice. Say mindful breathing is one, which will help you in hooking you onto the present, where you focus only onto your breathing, you inhale and exhale, that kind of stuff. And you also know that when you are even in eating, you are not mindful. You're thinking about something, you're checking your mobile phone, you're watching TV or a serial or something like that. So you're not aware of what you are eating. So that's the reason why most of the people realize that they have an unhealthy eating practice because they are eating too much, things like that. So we need to be in the present. So it's not just breathing, it's not eating, it's also about manipulating your environment by walking. So you are in the present. You are completely in the present, where you are aware of what step you are taking, what exactly where you are touching with your feet, and the kind of modality can be discussed here. So this is a very interesting process, which I strongly recommend you to explore this modality. So mindful practices can be learned, understood with the help of help of apps like Headspace and all. Otherwise, if you want to explore it further, you can a lot of YouTube videos available in this line. And this is the trend right now because most of the therapeutic models or coaching modalities right now in psychology incorporates mindfulness as a process. Mindfulness, by the way, is a Zen Buddhist practice. It's don't really worry about whether it's a branch of regularly intensely in our psychotherapeutic practice also as a part of coaching, as a way of life. I think I'm done for the presentation. Um, if you have any questions, we can take that. Otherwise, we can.
Thank you, sir. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. It was a wonderful coverage on mindful breathing, mindful eating, and mindful walking. Thank you so much, sir. Sir has a lot of achievements in his book. Sir is an consultant clinical psychologist, RCI registered, adjacent faculty, IIPR College, Chief Psychology Officer, yodos.com. Dr. Ginny K. Gopinath is a consultant clinical psychologist and a certified clinical coach. He completed his post graduation in applied psychology, Chief from Kasturba Medical College, Manipal. He has also completed master level program in yoga, Swami Vivekananda Yoga, Anusandhana Sasthana, astrology, and from Annamalai. His PhD is from University of Kerala. He was trained in CBT by Dr. R. Charity Training in Clinical Hypothesis from International Society of Hypnosis under Michael Yapka and Asen Aladdin at Germany. Currently, he is the Chief Psychology Officer at Your Dost Online Counseling and Emotional Wellness Company, Bangalore. Clinical Director and Chief Clinical Psychologist at Mind Matters Clinic, Bangalore. He is also the editor of the International Journal of Transformation of Consciousness, the publisher of Mind Matters magazine, the president of Indian Association of Clinical and Academic Hypothesis. In the past, he worked as the head of clinical operations at Optum International and director at the Insight Mental Health Services Private Limited. He was also an assistant professor at Department of Psychology, Christ University, Bangalore. Swami Vivekananda Yoga University, Indian Institute of Psychology and Research, Bangalore, and Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam. He regularly conducts workshops in different parts of the country. He has also conducted workshops in Nepal, Sri Lanka, Germany, Iran, Malaysia, and Middle East. He has presented papers and conducted workshops in national and international forums of mental health, has authored 4 books and a dozen research papers in national and international journals. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It was a great experience listening to you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Ms. Sharunya Doyal. She will be highlighting us on resilience and coping strategies to uncertainty. Ma'am is a psychologist, police force Mauritius. After graduating from Bangalore University in 2013, Sharunya Dayal returned to her home country, small island in the Indian Ocean. From there, she started on a journey of exploration of the actual psychology in the island, from working in schools to NGOs, universities, and the corporate sector, young adults at various levels. She has gathered a rich and diverse experience which she uses to bright, positive, sustainable change in her society. Sharuna Doyal is a clinical psychologist currently working in the public sector in Mauritius. I repeat, in Mauritius. She is also a part-time lecturer in mental health and volunteers with numerous local at NGOs. Ma'am, over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. 5 years. And thank you very much for this lovely introduction and really for having me today. I was a student of Bangalore University, like you mentioned, and I was studying abnormal psychology, clinical psychology, but I remember when Ashok sir would tell us stories about positive psychology, and that's when I discovered it, and I really, really liked it. So today, this is not my area of expertise. I do not carry out research in the field, but I'm very happy, and it's something that I try to include in whatever I do. So, like you mentioned, I'm a clinical psychologist. I work for a very large body of people. My daily activities consist of therapy. I do a lot of individual therapy. I do a lot of couple counseling sessions. I do a lot of training workshops and a lot of sensitization programs as well. So very happy to be here. And if I did get you correctly, today is going to be a mixed crowd. And I will try to make sure that nobody is lost, but at the same time, make sure that, all of you are going away with something that you can use, or maybe that will lead you to reading further and discovering new things. So I also listened to the previous speakers, and frankly, there's nothing much I could add. They've covered almost everything that could have been said. So what I would also try to do is, maybe in terms of my experience working on the field, try to tell you, what else could you do, what could work for you, what not, and also try to make sure that, I can also share, some of the things that happen here, because we are a very small country, and if you talk about mental health in Mauritius, it is still something that is, a budding field of expertise. So we've done a lot of work for sure, but we still have a very long way to go. Now, if I look at the COVID-19 experiences as non-resilient people. So it's not like if you're resilient, problems are not going to come your way, failures are not going to come your way. All these already happen, but what happens is that you have developed protective mechanisms so that you take these difficulties, you return them into a state of equilibrium and balance, or just try to make something better from it. One thing that I would like to point out here is that there are a lot of individual differences when we talk about resilience, when we talk about coping skills. So at any point, do not feel pressured to do exactly what your friend is doing. If you look at how people are going about their everyday life right now, and I suppose in India, if the situation is not yet controlled, a lot of you are still living very online lives. For example, today's it's not a seminar, it's a webinar. So a lot of your interactions would be online. What happens when you are a lot on social media platforms or are following a lot of people on different platforms? You can feel like, okay, this is working for them, it should work for me. Or if it doesn't work for you, you start thinking, why is it not working for me? I try to meditate. Why is it not working out for me? Why don't I feel instantly better? So always remember that whenever we talk about everything that's online, everything that's on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, etc., those are perceptions of people. So that person may perceive that, yoga, for example, is working for them. But maybe for you, it's more running. Maybe for you, there's a different kind of exercise that works for you. So don't feel pressurized and accept that there will be individual differences throughout. Now, research has shown that resilience protects people against and can sometimes even help people heal from can sometimes help people reverse depressive episodes, anxiety, fear, etc. When we talk about resilience and everything that comes under positive psychology, it's very important to understand that generally we assume that we have somebody who doesn't have any mental disorders, and what we kind of want to do is to bring the person to the best of their potential. So one very important thing that I want everybody here listening to understand and always remember is that we are not talking about people who have mental disorders. If you have somebody who has moderate depression, if you have somebody who's bipolar, if you have somebody who has any kind of a mental disorder, we cannot say, hey, why don't you build your resilience, right? It won't work. And these people absolutely, in any case, need professional help. Sometimes it's a psychologist, sometimes it's a psychiatrist, sometimes it's a multidisciplinary panel with both people and different other specialized professionals on the panel. So it's very important to understand that sometimes being confined can exacerbate certain mental disorders. But when you look around, you find people who have been chronically depressed, etc. They already have a very solid mechanism because they've been in and out of it. So sometimes, yes, it makes it worse for them, but in a lot of cases, you will see that, they are okay as well, right? And they know how to deal with those already, and they fare better than the other people. So research suggests that a person's degree of resilience may be modifiable, and the changes affect individuals on a physiological level, cellular level, perhaps even a more genetic level as well. So when we talk about resilience, from the time you are born until the time you die, you're not going to have the same level of resilience. Now, some people work very hard on building resilience, and that is excellent. we're going to try and do the same thing, maybe, learn a few techniques to do that. But often you will see that there are changes on many different levels. For example, for a lot of people, we're talking only about an emotional experience, but a lot of people will find that with a crisis, with their diminishing levels of resilience, they will feel certain physical changes as well in their bodies. Sometimes they might have things that are very connected to other areas of their lives as well. So this is maybe a familiar face. And what's really interesting about Sheryl Sandberg, who is the CEO of Facebook, is that at one point she lost her husband and she really was at a very low point. And she says that you're not born with a fixed amount of resilience. Like a muscle, you can actually build it up and you draw on it whenever you need that resilience. And she says something really beautiful. She says, in that process, you're going to figure out who you really are, right? And really become the best version of yourself. Now, for all you psychology students, this is not a new idea. You've been studying this again and again. And even management students and, business, I guess, students will have studied a bit of Maslow at some point. It's something that's said very often, but how do we take that idea and include it in our life? How do we embed that idea into our daily living and purpose of life, really? So this is something very interesting because she said that at one point she discovered the 3 Ps of emotional resilience by Martin Seligman. Now, Sheryl Sandberg, after going through all the hardship and really coming out of it as a complete winner, she wrote a book called Option B. I've linked to the book at the end. So if you have time, I know you have a lot of time right now, so do try to read that book. It's a beautiful experience and you are going to learn a lot about it. So she said what helped her out of the problem of her situation really was Seligman's 3 Ps of resilience. So the first one is personalization. The second one is pervasiveness. And the third one is permanence. So this is a fun representation that I found for you to remember. So if you look at personalization, think of it as ghosts of actions that have gone by, past actions. So we all have a lot of things in our lives that didn't turn out to be the way we wanted them to. And very often we find ourselves really blaming ourselves for that. We tend to tell ourselves, if I knew, I would have done that. Or, psychology is not a nice field of work. I would have chosen something else, because it's not working out. So it's very easy to blame yourself for it, right? And this is something everybody does every day, especially when times are hard. Then you have pervasiveness, which is the ghosts of the actions that you are still doing, right? For example, you can think about one negative thing and think that that one thing is going to define everything around you, right? And this is sometimes things are not even related to that particular thing, but for you, this one thing that didn't work out is going to pervade every aspect of your life. And the third one is permanence. You feel like because you did that choice and it was your fault, you will need to suffer the consequences forever in your life, right? So this is something that also really retains you from building that resilience. Now, how do we it's very interesting when we talk about it, very, very nice theory, but how do we put it into practice, right? So if you are with me, I want you to give yourself time to actually think about something, right? Think about something that you don't like at all, and think about something that you blame yourself for it. Think about its implications in your current life. Is it affecting you? Is it something that because you're blaming yourself for it, you can't move beyond that point? And is it something that is going to taint your view of the future as well? Now, let's try to find a more concrete example. In the wake of the COVID pandemic, a lot of people around the world would have lost their jobs. It's very unfortunate, but it's true for a lot of countries. So, for example, losing your job when you are betting everything on it, this is your, this is how you earn your bread, this is how you're going to make your family survive, etc., is something extremely stressful. So, if you look at it, with this personal point of view, you might start telling yourself, I was not good enough. That's why, somebody else that I know was retained and I was kicked out. You could start thinking that there is something wrong with me. Maybe, I didn't put in enough efforts. Maybe they don't like me personally. Or you might find something to do with yourself with regards to why that happened. And slowly you will see that as you go deeper into that, abyss of darkness, you will see that you start thinking about it in a permanent way. You start thinking, I lost my job, I will never get another job, what will happen, etc. And you will see that this might also be pervasive to other areas of your life. For example, because I don't have a job, I don't have enough money right now, my future is unclear, maybe I'm not a good parent after all, maybe I'm not a good son, daughter, etc., etc. So this being, a good parent, for example, is not really connected to that one job. When you look at it, you will see that all the negative feelings are going to pervade all the areas of your life. And this doesn't make you resilient at all. Now, how can you take this, turn it into something that's going to make you more resilient? So you take the personal, you try to make it impersonal. Look for things. Why did you lose your job? Is it because of you? If it was because of you, you maybe wouldn't have lost it during the pandemic. So maybe the company is struggling. Maybe your skill set is not fitting. And this is where you try also to explore other areas. So maybe I didn't like the job to start with. Maybe I feel like I can do something else. You will find this in a lot of social enterprises or small businesses. So those who are able to thrive and come out of this pandemic as winners are those who are evaluating what they're doing. Is this what we want to manufacture? What else can we do, right? Instead of saying, no, we shouldn't have gone into this line, this was a big mistake, etc., etc. So try to think about it from a more impersonal point of view, like really take a step back, analyze it, take yourself out of the equation if you can. Second is the impermanence of it. A lot of the problems that we face, we tend to think about them as, this is final. That is why you see a lot of people, especially recently, there's been a lot of suicides. One is way too many. And then, we are plagued by this. And very often it's easy to understand because in that moment, you feel like this is the only thing that can happen to you. Now, try to find aspects of it that is going to make you look at it as something that is going to exist only in a specific time. For example, if you look at losing your job, the most important part is the fact that you are still here. So if you are still here, you might find another job, you might find a better job, you might find a job that is more suitable for you if you stay strong and make sure that you're using your time productively. Then you can make it specific to a particular problem. Yes, I do feel bad because I lost my job, but what else can I do? Because I lost my job doesn't mean that I have to stay in my room, close the doors, don't see anybody, don't meet anybody. What else can I do with that time? Is there a hobby I can develop? Like the previous speaker mentioned, cultivate a hobby, learn a new language. And sometimes these are skills that, in the moment, you're not going to think that this is a big deal, but this could potentially influence your job prospects in the future. So do try that. Now, I was asked to talk about coping as well. So I'll try to do my best and try not to repeat too much what has already been said. So what exactly is coping? If you look at the Association of the Psychological Association dictionary of psychology, you will see that they've described coping as the use of cognitive and behavioral strategies to manage the demands of a situation where when these demands are appraised as taxing or exceeding resources, and also when there's a lot of negative emotions, etc. That's what you would do to reduce the negative emotions. So when you look at coping, you have adaptive coping, and you have problem focused coping. So you look at the problem specifically. What can you do about it? You try to control your situation. You figure out, what can I change in my environment to solve the problem, etc. You have positive self statements where you try to uplift yourself, tell yourself that you can do this, etc. You have emotion focused adaptive coping, where you try to minimize the effect. You, like we just said, you try to make it more specific. If this hasn't worked out, doesn't mean that all the areas of my life will work out, etc. You have short-term avoidance. Sometimes when there's a very big conflict, it's okay to give yourself some time. When you're in the middle of a fight, especially couples these days, confinement can be very difficult on couples, and from the therapies we do every day, we can see that. So sometimes when there's a conflict and there's a lot of negative emotion rising up, it's okay to take some time off and to come back to it when those emotions have subsided, and when you want to talk about it, more level-headedly in a lot of ways. So you can, if you want to distract, have something to change your mind of it, or not to think about the negative things in that moment. And when you feel better, definitely come back and resolve the issue. You have cognitive restructuring. I saw a lot of you spoken about CBT, etc. So there are lots of small things that you can do on an everyday basis. You don't need to be in therapy to actually go towards an adaptive coping, which is the good form of coping that is there. Now you have maladaptive coping, which is a complete avoidance. You don't want to talk about it at all. It becomes the elephant in the room. It's there, it's disturbing everybody, but we will not address it. And that's kind of bad. Sometimes to avoid certain things, you will find a lot of people start drinking too much. A lot of people start smoking. Sometimes young people get very tempted to try drugs and to try things that are going to help them be in a different sort of a world and not face the problems that they have. You have disengagement, withdrawal as well, which is sometimes you really don't want to get into it, and really address the issues. So sometimes you find people can become a little aggressive as well, and they can ruminate, keep thinking about it without any solution, just thinking about how big the problem is, etc. So don't do this to yourself. Try to take yourself away from that situation. Try to take your mind off things if you can. Don't be resignated. There are lots of things that you won't be able to control. For example, if you look at the pandemic, you cannot control how many people are dying. You cannot control the progression of the disease. You, to a large extent, cannot control, how people are behaving, etc. But there are lots of things that you can control. For example, by taking your precautions, by being safe, by not going out, you can decide to protect yourself, your family, etc., etc. So try to focus on the things that you can change versus those things that you can't change. Now, in psychology, very often you'd see defense mechanisms are studied, and that's another very interesting field. And if you look at coping mechanisms, they're slightly different from defense mechanisms. When we talk about defense mechanisms, very often we talk about things that are, pretty much automatic for us. But when we talk about coping mechanisms, those are controlled efforts. We we orient them. We also want them to be able to control stresses, whereas our defense mechanism are just going to shut out everything and make sure that we are protected inside, right? So this is unfortunately not the way we can live in the society. So sooner or later, you will have to deal with it. So when we talk about coping mechanisms, you'd see there's a lot of emphasis on allowing expressions as well. How do you feel? What is it that you want to do about it? And they're quite flexible, like I was telling you. If we say, for example, what is the one coping mechanism that works for your friend? Maybe for you, that's not going to be the same thing. Maybe there's something that you would have tried and wouldn't work on you. So try to keep that flexibility mindset and, move on to something, or try to find something that's exciting for you that helps you out generally. So we won't go into the details because I think are we good on time? We still have time, right? Okay. Yes, so let's assume we do have a little bit more time. So I want to go through this roadmap to navigating the crisis, as I call it, and try to make the most of it. Now, everybody has spoken about this, and I think I'll try not to dwell too much on things that have been said. But these are very general things. Do not be very much stressed out if you cannot if you cannot do them to perfection. Do not be too harsh on yourself, and also try to do the best you can, right? Now, the first one is building your connections. Everybody speaks about it. I think connecting with people who are empathetic, connecting with people who are understanding, and also, it does remind you that you're not alone in this crisis. And sometimes, being able to talk to like-minded people, from the same discipline, from the same field, for example, can be something that's very soothing. And if you look at psychologists, for example, very often, especially right now, there are lots of people who seek help. So sometimes it can be overwhelming dealing with this day in and day out. You might want to talk to a colleague. You might want to be able to connect with somebody who's sharing the same experiences as you. So if you look at the pain of when we talk about COVID, some people would have lost close relatives, some people would have lost close friends. So that kind of traumatic incident really changes everything for them. It's no longer a pandemic that's happening outside. It's something that's also very personal to them. So sometimes that pain and not knowing what to do, because if you look at how people are dying, there are lots of people who won't be able to follow the rituals that they have when somebody passes away, and that can be very hard in understanding and dealing with loss. So just being able to talk about it, will make you feel less isolated and probably deal with it in a better way. Now, there's another thing that I want to talk to you about: building your connections. Yes, friends are very good. Relatives, if you manage to talk to them, try to talk to your grandparents if you have grandparents at home. Sometimes just ask them, how do you feel? It's a question that we don't ask very often, but you'd be surprised at how many things they have to tell you and how happy they would be to share. So try to have that conversation as well. And also, what I think is really effective is try to join a group. It could be any group. It could be your friends from school. It could be a group of people who like a particular thing. Think about what's your thing. Is it making crochet? Is it cooking? Is it is it public speaking? Try to figure out what it is. So just being able to share a hobby with a lot of people takes it to the higher level, and it keeps you engaged and motivated. Next is foster wellness. And no matter how many times we say that, there's no mental well-being without physical well-being, and there's no physical well-being without mental well-being. So these two are always going to work hand in hand. try to practice mindfulness, like the previous speaker said. Try to do an exercise that works for you, and really be creative. People are not going to be able to go to parks, people are not going to be able to go to the gym, etc. So try to find something that you can do with people who are with you. And I was listening to Jacinta Ardern the other day, and she talks about the bubble. She says the people who are going to be confined with you, these are your bubble. So with those people, it's actually fine to do, activities and, even exercising together. So try to also avoid negative outlets. When we talk about fostering wellness, negative outlets are very, very common. And I mean, I can't tell you how many people, just because they've been at home for 2 months here or elsewhere, will have developed, a drinking habit, will start smoking more than they usually do, will find some form of, a harmful behavior that allows them to escape the moment, but in the long term isn't good for them. So as much as you can, try to avoid it, because, the temptation really is there. And because there's not much going on otherwise, it tends to be very tempting. So try to avoid that. The next one is find a purpose. It looks very interesting. It sounds very nice, a very nice thing to say. Find a purpose, but it's very hard in real life. So, how can you find a purpose? Try to help others just by volunteering. Sometimes volunteer to just listen to people. And it might sound like a very small thing to do, but you never know when somebody's needing help and wants, an open ear that is not going to be judgmental. So maybe check on your friends, check on your relatives, check on the elderly relatives that you have. Very often they are not able to express themselves openly, and they're not very used to everything that we'll talk about in terms of expressing your emotions, self-help, etc. So try to be there in that way. Be proactive. Understand that this is a hard moment for everybody, but what can you do about it, right? If you, for example, if you have a very big problem, if you look at the COVID crisis, for a lot of people, it would mean a lot of things together: losing a job, sometimes losing a semester. I don't know how it is for you right now at school, but for us, we were about to cancel the whole semester. And that created a lot of difficulties for students and lecturers. I also part-time at a couple of universities in Mauritius. So because we don't know what's happening, there's uncertainty, and at the same time, there's a lot of insecurity. It tends to be very easy to, be completely dazzled by it all. So try to be proactive, try to find out, what can you do in that time? How can I continue learning? For example, all of you who are here, in a lot of ways, this is a continuation of your learning. Maybe you find things, you go back, read about it, develop something, or find something that you like, that will stay with you for a very long time. So try to find purpose in those ways. Then try to move towards your goals, if you have any, if it is, language, if it is a specific thing, if it is learning how to cook, if it is, learning how to dance. There's lots of tutorials online. They are becoming more and more user friendly as people discover that this is also a way to make things work. Try to look for opportunities for self discovery. So, there are many people who've told me that, there's so many things that they never realized or they never had time to think about. But now that they have that time, it's very interesting, and they're discovering new things about themselves, about their partners, about their children, about their parents. So try to embrace those heavy thoughts as well. Try to keep things in perspective. Yes, you on your own will not be able to, for example, change a complete government's policy, but you do play a part in that area as well. So try to look at, how will you be able to do that, instead of just catastrophizing a difficulty. Try to find a silver lining to it. Try to see, how can you make the most out of it. Try to accept change. There is no way we could have prevented this from happening. yes, some countries are dealing with it better, others less better. It depends on so many factors. It depends on the people, it depends on the infrastructure, it depends sometimes on the climate, on all the cultural aspects, etc. So there are so many things that we cannot control in a lot of ways. So accept that there will be changes and try to go with it. For example, for us, we are at a stage where we are going towards a deconfinement, so everything is going back to normal, but you still have the social distancing procedures. So, for example, if we meet people, we want to hug them, we want to shake hands with them, we know that this is not going to be possible. Now, how do we find a way to go around this, but at the same time make the person feel that, I'm happy to see you, and I welcome you, etc. So all these, we need to work on it, and try to find alternative ways that are safe, keeping in mind that this pandemic might be here for a very long time, even after normal life has resumed. Try to learn from your past, try to see what has gone wrong. And I remember when I worked in a school with very young children, they were very happy about all the, when I would give a test, they were always very happy about everything that they had gotten right. So one day I told them, what's the most interesting thing? Is it what you have, all the rights that you have, or is it the mistakes that you made? Then one little guy came out and said, it's the mistake, because if I learn that, I'm not going to do it again. So that is something that, try to build in your life, because when you do something in a good way, it's very nice. You appreciate it for it to get recognition. But when you make a mistake, it's an opportunity for you to grow and learn from it. One very important point that I want to highlight is seeking help. If you feel that you need to talk to a professional at any point, do not hesitate to seek help. A lot of people have suicidal ideation. A lot of people have depressive symptoms, and they don't share it. They let it be. Sometimes they think they will pass with time, etc. There shouldn't be any shame. There shouldn't be any kind of embarrassment to seek help from professionals, to talk about it with your friends. Even if you have a friend who comes to you with this, it's always important for them to see a professional who can make a proper diagnostic and make sure that they get help in a timely manner. So do not hesitate to do that. Everything that we talk about are aimed at improving a person's experience, but these things do not work if the person has a disorder, if the person is affected at a cognitive, behavioral, physical level as well. So always be aware to seek help, and just by working on resilience or reading a book on resilience is not going to cure depression, for example, anxiety, for example, and you need to go for professional help. The last one, all of these have been taken from here and there and things that I liked, mostly from the APA's website. But this last one is something that I personally want to highlight. There's a lot of romanticizing the pandemic. For a lot of people, and it makes a lot of sense. We've never had this kind of time. A lot of people are at home. If you look at the videos and what people are sharing every day, they try to find a positive side to it, which is excellent and brilliant. This said, be aware of the fact that this is not what it is going to look like for everybody. There will be people who have lost, or who will lose close ones. There will be people who are going to get the disease, the virus, and it's not going to be the same for them. So always be aware that you are not spending a holiday. This is not a holiday that you are going through at home. Yes, we want to learn this, we want to learn that, we want to post pictures, we want to be very happy about it, etc., etc. But this is survival mode. This is a situation of crisis. People are dying. It's very, very important to also be aware of those aspects. So if you can manage to survive, if you can manage to be healthy and fit by the time we, life reopens in a way, that is already something very, very important that you are doing right now. So don't be hard on yourself. Don't have unrealistic expectations. Don't think that after 2 months suddenly you will become a master chef, or for example, I can't draw at all. So if I go into confinement and I start thinking after 1 month I'll become a Picasso, I'll be very disappointed and I'll be very, very sad about it. So don't have those unrealistic expectations. Yes, of course, use every bit of time to make the most of it, but at the same time, be kind to yourself, be kind to other people who are struggling. I think with this, I will finish. Just a quick thing about. Oh, yes, so that's a very interesting book that I read, and really advise you to read it if you have time. It's called Option B, Facing Adversity, Building Resilience, and Finding Joy. So even if you're not a psychology student, it's a very easy read, and you might like it. And then if you have time and you find any of the concepts interesting, you might try to read anything by Martin Seligman. Lots of freely available short courses online as well. You might try to do that in your free time. Why not? Something that's going to come and support whatever you're studying, be it in whatever field. And then, of course, I referred a lot to the American Psychological Association's website, where I know information is tried and tested and researched. So over to you. Thank you very much for having me. It has been a great pleasure. I don't know how many people are going to watch this, and just a small note, be strong, take care of yourself, but don't forget that you can also take care of others. And it's very important not only to think about personal resilience, but also to think about community resilience. So what are we doing as a community? And I think I'll end by saying that it has been a great privilege. Ashok sir has been a great, great inspiration. Even after I finished my master's degree, I've often thought about the stories he would tell in class. And even if this is not my line of expertise, I try to include as much as possible of positive psychology, research, and resilience, etc., in the trainings that I do these days. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Ma'am, can we just post one question? It's from one of the participants.
Yes.
Yeah, ma'am, the question goes this way.
Just a second. I will. Oh God. Sorry. Yes, I will just stop sharing so I can see you better.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you see me?
No, ma'am.
Good. I found it. Sorry. Yes,
Yeah.
tell me.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, ma'am, how we will embrace healthy thoughts? The scenario of the world is changing. The inspirations and aspirations are changing day by day. So how will we embrace the healthy thoughts in us?
Absolutely. And I think this is a very relevant question. I would be lying to you if I told you that I have the answer. I don't have the exact answer. Nobody has the exact answer. And I think this is something that you need to remember. We're all trying to do our best, and try to do your best every day. In a lot of ways, once you stop thinking negatively, once you start going through that path, it's a very rapid decline. So once you start thinking that nothing is going to change in the world, everybody's going to die, this is the end of the world, etc., you get absorbed in that abyss of darkness very easily and very quickly. And I think the answer really is all of you people, because if you look at I'm assuming that I I am talking mostly to students that are studying right now at the university at St. Anne's College. So all of you people are the youth. You are the people who are going to live through this unprecedented crisis, and how it shapes you is going to matter a lot, because when you look at the world, when you look at the future, you are the future. It's nobody else, it's you. So to a very large extent, people like me, like others, it's not that we've lived our lives, but our experiences have shaped us in a specific way. And for you as young people, it's very important, one, to be as open as possible to learning. I mean, when we talk about learning, it's very often you might be doing, for example, you do business, and you might think, positive psychology, that is psychology, it's not going to help me, I will not get marks, etc. So let that be, I will skip that. What I want to try to tell you is that as a young person, you don't know how the world will look tomorrow. So try to get as many opportunities as possible to learn through your friends, teachers, mentors, at school, take up whatever you can, because the more tools you have, the more equipped you're going to be for the future. And there's another very important thing that we don't talk about enough. I think young people, it's very important for you to do an introspection from time to time. Think about, where do you want to go? But more than where do you want to go in terms of aspirations, in terms of these are the goals, I want to achieve this, I want to do my studies. Think about what kind of a person you want to be. Do you want to be a kind person? Do you want to be somebody who helps? And I think that is something that is really going to build tomorrow's future in a very, very way. And also, just being with people and wanting to help people, you will see is going to really steer you into the positive, healthy thoughts track, because then you're going to see that I'm not the only one, and you'll realize that helping brings you actually a lot more than you think it would, right? Did I answer to your question?
Yes, ma'am, very much. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Ma'am, we have one last question. Can I just post it, ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, I do. I can.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So the question goes this way, ma'am. How can we maintain psychological resilience with college students in this lockdown period? Because
Yes.
they have become too stressed for the exams.
I hope I don't say anything that will get me in trouble. So
No, ma'am, not at all.
maybe I'll try to take the example of my students like a couple of months ago. So what happened here? I don't know if it's the same model there. Suddenly with the virus, everything for us became online. Now, there's a problem with online classes, is that there's a lot of the social interactions that you don't get. As a student, you want to go to class a bit early, you meet your friends, you want to be chatting in a little corner there, and your lecturer isn't happy about it, but you have a lot of fun, etc., etc. So it's not just that learning part of it; it's the whole social structure that a college or a class really is. Now, about the stress of the exams, what has happened here is that for this one semester, a lot of universities aren't really doing an exam. So, they're still debating as to how to do that. So a lot of it has, been more like coursework will give you the marks. Now, when you talk about an exam, it's very important to, work hard for exams, etc. But maybe as a student, what I can share, as an ex-student of Bangalore University, what I can share is that life is so much more than an exam. I mean, I wasn't the best, the most brilliant, the most hardworking student in my class. And, I think it turned out okay. I think what's really important is what you are learning is equipping you to build a future. not just for you, for your friends, for your families, for your community, for the world in a lot of ways. So don't just look at it as one exam. It is all the learning that you're doing. Try to enjoy what you're doing. Try to find different ways of learning it. If you want to, try to discuss with your friends, etc. And when it comes to that one final exam, if you ace that exam, it's absolutely brilliant. I'm very happy for you. But if you don't ace it, it's not the end of the world. You will have other opportunities. Nothing is more important than your life, because until you're alive, you will have opportunities, you will have other things that might come to your way. Now, all this is very good to hear, I know. Maybe I can give you some practical tips. Like, if you look at your exam, what I found is planning is very interesting and really helps you de-stress. So if you look at it as a bulk, this very scary monster that is called exam is going to come. Everybody is scared, but try to break it down in terms of subjects, in terms of what you need to study, and try to impose certain deadlines on yourself so that you are doing a systematic progression instead of just having a bulk to study towards the end of it. Try to rationalize a lot, try to find creative ways, and there's a lot of power in collective studying that I found missing in a lot of students these days. So it's really not about being better than your friend. Sometimes with your friend, you are much better than either of you individually could be. So try to have that kind of collaborative learning that is really going to push you and make sure that you are not that scared of it, but you look at it as an opportunity. I will have an exam and I will get to test for myself as well, whether whatever I have been learning is effective or not, right? So it's again a very, very tricky question to answer, but I think you have a few pointers there you can use to make sure that you go into your exam more level-headedness, and especially with more confidence in yourself and with the name of doing better at it. Over to
Thank
you.
you. Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful listening to you. You really made a wonderful coverage on individual differences, mental disorders, which require professional help. In this scenario, in this pandemic, yes. And it was a wonderful quote, which I would like to really highlight, that you're not born with a fixed amount of resilience like a muscle. You can build it up, draw it on when you need it. And in that process, you will figure out who you really are, and you just might become the very best of you. And you had a wonderful coverage on the 3 P's of emotional resilience, ma'am: personalization, perseverance, and permanence. And you had wonderfully in detail explained about the coping roadmap of navigating the crisis and making the most of it, which is the hour of the day in today's scenario. And yes, ma'am, I hope all the participants and the management team of my institution, we will definitely follow the book which you have referred. We thank you on behalf of the entire management of St. Anne's Degree College for Women. I sincerely thank you, ma'am, also with handling so much patience for the technical errors and all those things. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, Ramon,
audio